Hello and welcome to Hollywood Blockbusters. I am your host, Joe Hollywood. And once again, I am joined by Imaginos Pete.
Hey, hey.
And Andrew Walker.
Hello.
And I'm looking forward to today's topic because this is something I am so passionate about. I kind of want to kick things off by playing a quote that was written by Charles Dickens.
Classy.
When he this is basically what he had to say about CGI.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way.
I think he was talking about CGI when he wrote that. If he didn't, it's a perfect analogy for this era of CGI that we live in today.
The irony is that CGI was used to create that.
Whoa. That's AI. No, we've seen some really remarkable advancements in the area of computer-generated imagery, but then we've seen really god-awful applications of the technology.
I feel like more of the latter.
Yeah. And you know what? I have another quote I'm going to play, and this one makes me laugh out loud because this isn't necessarily about CGI, but it can be. It describes CGI so perfectly.
You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Oh, that is such a perfect description of CGI. CGI should only be done when absolutely necessary, when there's no other alternative. But Hollywood has become so dependent on it that even in areas where they can just use a human actor or real world backgrounds, they're creating them in CGI for reasons I don't understand. I mean, obviously it has to do with money, but are these
And
CGI creations, are they any cheaper? I mean, it seems like the average budget on a film today is at least $200 million. And sometimes they make their money back and sometimes they don't.
There's auditing the Fed, there's auditing the Pentagon, and there's auditing Hollywood to find out where all the bodies buried.
We're looking at you, Disney. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the history of CGI in film. Now, Googling this topic, I was blown away. First thing I typed into Google was, what is the first use of computer-generated imagery in film? Now, if I was to ask you guys to answer that question, what decade do you think that computer imagery was first used in a major motion picture?
60s? I'd go 70s.
What if I told you that it was 1958?
50s was going to be my second choice.
And it was in a very well-known movie called Vertigo.
Oh,
now,
wow.
It wasn't necessarily used in the way that you think it would be used today. When you watch the opening credits of Vertigo, there's these really stylish titles that come in and out. And you got like a close-up of a woman's eye. But then you see these like spirograph-type images, these colorful lines that form a shape, sort of a kaleidoscope. And apparently, there's a guy who created a rudimentary computer to generate those images. So those were the very first images created by a computer that we saw on film, and that really blew me away. 1958.
Written on those key cards where there's just a bunch of cards you can feed.
Right. Right. No, these. Imagine Hitchcock going, "Ooh, I like that." So it's just colorful animation used at the beginning of the film, but pretty impressive that someone in 1958 figured out a way to do that.
Hitchcock had a couple first.
Yeah.
And
Oh, definitely. He was an innovator.
I don't think we talk about.
Machine will give my movie life.
Was that Dr. Evil? I was going to say, of course, everybody knows Hitchcock, but I don't think, at least I don't hear people talk about as, I don't know, maybe if this is the right word, revolutionary some of his things were.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of it was experimental. Like one of my favorite Hitchcock movies that not a lot of people talk about was Rope, where it was an experiment in long, unbroken, continuous
how they would
takes.
move the sets.
Yeah, and they would time the scenes to be the equivalent of one length of film, a reel of film.
Yeah.
And so the scene would end as the film was running out, and they'd go into a dark space, change the film, and then do the next
It's
scene.
almost like the Godfather to the continuous shot, like 1917. They tried to do the entire World War I movie in one shot.
That and Birdman. Remember Birdman,
yeah.
which won an Oscar.
Yes.
All right, so the next advancement in computer imagery was the 1973 film Westworld. And the way they used it, which was pretty interesting, is you see Yul Brynner like sitting on his horse on a ridge somewhere, and he's looking at some people in the distance, and the camera shows us his perspective, but his perspective is pixelated. Now, at the time, I don't even know if that word was invented yet, pixelated, but what they did is they shot the scene normally, then ran it through a computer and created these blocks of information to give it that pixelated look. And they were basically saying, well, this is how this android sees the world. And so that was the first use of an image created by a computer that was part of the narrative, that was part of the story. So I found that really fascinating.
Pixelated? He OD'd on pixie sticks? Not Yule. Is that another word for cocaine? The sweet sugar?
Now, this one, I had to be careful as I'm researching things at work because I didn't want someone to look over my shoulder and go, what the heck are you looking at? But apparently there was a movie that came out in 1981 called Looker. And I totally forgot about this film and forgot about this moment. And as I was researching, I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So Susan Day, who's famous for being Laurie Partridge in the Partridge Family, she did like full frontal nudity in this film. And there's a scene where she's getting scanned by computers, and they're turning that scan into a computer image of a female human body. And apparently in 1981, this was the first time in film that they used computers to simulate a human figure as a computer-generated image. And I'm like, wow, that was a bigger milestone than I thought it was. I remember seeing that movie on cable for the wrong reasons. I wanted to see Susan Day. But I didn't realize at the time that was a huge milestone. That was the first computer-generated human figure we ever saw in film.
Well, regarding special effects, this is post 1977. This is now, there's pre-Star Wars and then there's post-Star Wars, and the rapid ascension to where we're leading to, which I think is 1993.
And I'm glad you brought up Star Wars, because the only use of computers in Star Wars were to operate the cameras. And they would do a movement with a model, then they'd reset the camera, and they'd put maybe a new model in or whatever, and then the computer would replicate that movement and then reset, and then they would add another element. And a computer allowed repetitive movements of the camera, and then each of those films are stacked on top of each other to create this layered effect. Well, who was, if you were to name someone as the patron saint of computers and film, you got to go with George Lucas. I saw a documentary on the evolution of industrial light and magic, and this guy was crusading for computers and film from the get-go. He's like, I envision a day when we shoot movies digitally instead of on film, and people were like, you're crazy. That's crazy talk. No one's going to go see something shot on a VHS camcorder. And he was a visionary like Hitchcock. He was the one who kept pushing for it. As a matter of fact, he kind of pitched his ideas to some different camera manufacturers, and most of them laughed him out of their office. But I believe it was Sony, and I hope I'm getting this right, where they put out a camera that allowed the camera to record in 24 frames a second, which is film mode.
Yeah.
And so Lucas was instrumental in designing the equipment that was used to shoot film digitally.
Yeah, he was a pioneer. What, Skywalker Sound? He helped build the Pixar computer.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
He doesn't get enough credit for that, or blame, depending on how you look at it.
I'll tell you one thing: this horseless carriage thing, this fad will never catch on.
Yeah.
Mark my words.
Same thing with television. Why would you watch TV in your home?
This digital abacus.
When you have the telegraph, what else do you need?
So the next milestone, and I don't think Lucas had anything to do with this just yet, but in 1982 we were introduced to Tron, and Tron was kind of a mediocre success at the box office, but we did get to see things that we'd never seen before, and one of those things was the first use of computer-generated imagery with human beings on screen at the same time. So they, in the little facts that I looked up, it said there are over 200 scenes with CGI backgrounds combining computer images with live actors. And for the first time in movie history, a full 15 minutes of the film was created entirely by a computer. Now, we're going to get to another film, which was the first movie to be 100% created by a computer, but Tron had the first 15-minute segment created by a computer. There were some exciting action sequences in Tron, but I remember as a kid watching it going, this ain't no Star Wars. Nothing was Star Wars. I was like, yeah, with everything that came after it. And not only now I can go back and appreciate what they accomplished in that film. Now, just recently, within the last year or so, I revisited a film. And again, this was another major milestone that I wasn't entirely aware of at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, I don't know. 1984 is The Last Starfighter. And this is a movie that I always argue is ripe for a remake because they got a lot of things right. I love the concept of a kid being recruited through a video game to help save the galaxy. Yep. But when they cut to the space battles in the spaceships, oh my God, I've seen Atari graphics look more convincing than these spaceships in The Last Starfighter. And man, I would love to see them take another stab at that. Have you guys seen The Last Starfighter? Do you remember your recollections of it?
I do. I saw it a couple of times, and I was entertained by it, but I do remember the special effects kind of taking me out because it wasn't Star Wars. Because this is 84, so even Return of the Jedi has come out. So when you look at that fight in Return of the Jedi, I'm like, oh, that space fight. That's the space fight.
Exactly.
And then Starfighter comes in like, oh, no.
Yeah. It's almost like this digital technology was right on the cusp, but I think they moved too soon on it.
It was a precursor for what was to come with future CGI. Someone sees Star Wars and says, I want that.
Yeah.
1983, 1984. So almost being made at this, as soon as Jedi comes in, like, make something, get it out there.
Yeah. And this kind of illustrates kind of the diversion. I don't know if that's the right word, but the difference between Star Wars using models made by special effects guys and shooting them against a blue screen versus trying to create a spaceship entirely in a computer. There just was no comparison. The models just looked so much more realistic in the film than these early computer-generated images. And they got better over time, but I don't know. There's something about the real-world models. They always just looked more convincing to me. Then the very next year, this was a really major milestone, and this was this did have the hand of Industrial Light and Magic in it. Young Sherlock Holmes came out in 1985. Has a scene where a knight jumps out of a stained glass window, and that knight, looking like he's made of stained glass, is walking, talking character that was the first fully CGI character in a film ever. And
I didn't see that live, so I can only imagine what that was like, because I obviously saw that well after. So I still found it impressive, even watching in retro.
Yeah.
But
now, Dennis Muren was the effects guy on this film, who was legendary working on the Star Wars films. but he kind of oversaw the effects. The guy who's credited with creating this fully CGI character is a name you may recognize, a young John Lasseter, who went on to Pixar fame, creating movies like Cars, Toy Story, and all the stuff that came with it. So that was his breakthrough.
A real indie guy.
Right. Yeah, little art house films. Yeah. So that was a huge milestone in film. Now, another milestone came a few years later, 1988. You guys remember a little film called Willow? I think you brought it up on a recent podcast. And there's a pretty spectacular sequence in there that, for the time, looks surprisingly effortless, and that is the morphing scene.
Yep.
Where Willow, Willow is the Warwick Davis, right? He's trying to, I think, break a spell on a woman who's been cast as an animal. And you see animal after animal after animal morphing from one animal into another until she reappears as the woman. And I don't know if we appreciated at the time when that movie came out how remarkable that was. We had never seen anything like that before, that morphing technology that we just take for granted today. But back then, it was a big deal. And
I can only imagine.
I realized it.
I can only imagine what it was like at the time. Again, I didn't get to see that live either. I saw Willow well after it came out, like maybe 1991, 92. But as we're going along this timeline, I see stuff building to what was to me my Star Wars moment.
Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there. Now, following Willow, we're talking a huge leap here in 1991. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, the liquid metal T-1000. That was such a huge advancement in technology to see what they were capable of doing.
Oh, we might have skipped over a little bit. We got to give credit. Before the T-1000 was the Abyss with the Tendo.
Also James Cameron.
You're right. Yeah, James Cameron with that water creature.
Tendril.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we kind of skipped over that, but
because
that was remarkable.
Because James Cameron saw that and was like, oh, I know what I can use this for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
I forgot about that.
And the big challenge for that particular water creature was reflecting the world around it, because water, has reflective nature to it. And so they had to use computers to sort of map the environment onto the surface of that water creature to reflect it. Otherwise, the audience would never buy into it. So that was a major milestone that then led to the liquid metal T-1000. And I remember seeing that in the theater, and my jaw was just on the floor.
When he walked through the bars at the medical facility?
But the gun hits it, and it reminds you that that's not part of him, and he kind of forgot and had to turn the gun. And what we saw in that film was just so incredible.
And the fact that he could turn into other people, and he murders the step-parents of with
John Connor,
John Connor with the spike through the milk carton.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh my God.
Your parents are dead. Yeah. It was just remarkable. And so if you're doing, a Mount Rushmore of CGI, we're talking Lucas, we're talking Lasseter, we're talking James Cameron, who really pushed the technology forward by leaps and bounds. I mean, again,
Cameron's going to make another appearance on this thing for another project he did.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just quickly reading about The Abyss. It won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects
that year
for The Abyss.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be an episode if I didn't say this, but I have not seen The Abyss. And it's been on my list for a long time.
I appreciate that there are two streaks that are still on right now. Andrew's streak, and then I was gone for a while. I thought you guys were going to have an episode without me, but you guys actually kept the
streak alive.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I have not missed an episode to date.
Would not be the same without.
Well, thank you.
And so ILM helped with some of the CGI for The Abyss. Says the company spent 6 months to create 75 seconds of CGI needed for the creature.
Isn't that amazing?
A lot of whiskey and a lot of cigarettes were consumed in that base, like trying to get this thing to work.
Yeah, exactly. I've messed around with keyframing and editing, and I try to make a simple animation, and then you go back to watch it, and it darts off this way, and you're like, where'd it go? I could imagine spending 6 months on 75
It
seconds.
takes forever to do that yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't see that listed on a lot of lists that I saw. And
because,
you're
I mean,
on top of
it's
it.
not surprising because people, but when you said James Cameron, that's the whole reason I thought of. Right before the liquid effect, liquid metal effect, they had the liquid water effect.
Yeah. Yeah, it was incredible. From him mimicking the floor and then rising up from the floor to take the shape
and the
of
water tendril taking the face of the lady.
Yeah. It's incredible what Cameron oversaw. It's amazing. And now, just 2 years later, another leap forward. And we've talked about this movie many, many times, and I just want to quickly recap that when the novel Jurassic Park came out by Michael Crichton, I read it once in like 2 or 3 days and then read it again just like a week later. And then I don't know what year it was when they announced that they were going to turn it into a film. And I was like, there's no way. And then they said the director is going to be Steven Spielberg. And I'm like, man, I shouldn't doubt Steven Spielberg, but I've read this book, and I can tell you that it is going to be impossible to adapt into a film.
And you were not wrong.
Yeah.
Because his initial concept, which I'm sure Hollywood was going, only Steven would propose this, like shooting Jaws in the ocean, which will never be allowed ever again.
Yeah.
And then him saying, I wanted to make full-size dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And I'm going, Steven, who's going to fund this? This is not robotics. I mean, you're going to make life. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I love the story. And again, they spell out all the detail when you watch this history of industrial light and magic. But they were at a crossroads at this point. They were like, do we use traditional stop motion animation on the dinosaurs?
With Phil Tippett.
And then, a guy raised his hand and says, you can do it on computers. And they said, all right. They almost turned it into a contest. They said, Phil Tippett, let's see what you can do with stop motion maquettes. And then this other guy, what can you do on your computer? And when you watch the side-by-side comparisons, I don't think Jurassic Park would have been the success that it was had they gone the stop-motion route. Because even though stop-motion animation is impressive, it still looked like something from the 50s. Like stop-motion
like Jason
animation, has never evolved beyond a certain point. It's always going to look choppy and stuttery and just something not quite right
never
about
be as
it.
smooth.
Yeah.
It can never. It's impossible.
You don't think so? You don't think we'll get to the point
where stop motion to actually like hand manipulation to make it look? I mean, they tried with my man Tim Burton.
Yeah, and they do it for like cartoony type things like Nightmare Before Christmas. And it's a perfect application for cartoony style animation.
But to do live action?
Yeah, not to try and convince an audience that a raptor is running around. Stop motion just doesn't cut it.
I saw some test footage of that, and it didn't look great.
Yeah.
But I think we might come to a point where the video technology gets so good that they might be able to.
I don't think we'll be going back. I don't think we're going to be going back.
You're talking about using CGI to create stop motion effects to make it
well,
smoother.
I'm not saying CGI. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just spitballing.
Now, there is a cool story, and I feel bad that I don't know this person by name because he should be considered among, the great innovators of computer-generated imagery. But apparently he found out that some Disney bigwigs were going to be taking a tour of the offices where he was working on the computer animation. Kathleen Kennedy. Yeah, it was like an entourage. And he deliberately had a skeleton of a T-Rex animated walking on his computer, and he left it on as if he was like, oh, that thing? And he had it on a loop as the executives came in, and they said, what do you got going on
That's diabolical.
Yeah, and they said, this is it. That was the moment that the industry went that direction, and I think it was Phil Tippett said we're extinct.
To his credit, he admitted that. He admitted there was some jealousy, and he was trying to big guy everyone and saying, don't worry about this computer stuff.
Yeah.
Stop motion's the way to go, Steven. And they ordered those guys, hey, stop wasting time. We have other stuff to work on.
Yeah.
And yeah, if there's Netflix has the movies that made us.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone for our audience out there, check it out on Netflix, movies that made us. They talk about so we can get that gentleman's name because I can't remember for the love of me.
Yeah. Please look it up. And I feel bad if he were to hear this. He's screaming his name at the computer right now.
But you're right. He got it.
Yeah.
And then Steven Spielberg is cold-blooded.
Yeah.
He took Phil Tippett's line and gives it to
and put it in the movie.
Yeah, I was like, that's cold. I mean,
Don't you mean extinct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a huge milestone in the history of CGI. And when you see some of the test shots of the Gallimimus stampede and things like that, and you're like, this is it. Like, you can animate one dinosaur and then stamp it down 100 times and then adjust the timing of it, so now it looks like a huge herd of Gallimimus. Yeah.
Stand the test of time to this day.
Yes.
You could watch that, and it's better than a lot of the schlock that's out there.
And we're going to be getting to that
I was just going to say that it's been 32 years almost since that movie came out.
Yeah.
And the Brachiosaurus scene,
Yeah.
I remember when I was a little kid seeing that on the screen.
Yeah, that's
It was. I of course I had never seen anything like that before.
That was our Star Wars for our generation. That's our
Yes.
Star Wars
It is.
moment.
Yeah.
There's pre-Jurassic Park and there's post-Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And the one moment I'll never forget, even with my skepticism that, can Spielberg pull this off, I'll never forget seeing the very first trailer and going, oh my God, what am I seeing here? Like, knowing that this movie, just seeing the minute-long trailer, this movie was a game changer.
Although, interesting enough, you must have seen different trailers because the trailer that I saw, I remember, they had the T-Rex foot stepping on the mud.
Yeah, I remember
and that was
that.
practical. That was a practical effect. That's Stan Winston, who did a phenomenal job of, like you said, blending, knowing when to use CGI, when to use practical effects to get the best performance.
Yeah, and they had a full-size animatronic T-Rex that malfunctioned in the rain and all that stuff. But that's what makes that movie so special is you never quite knew when they went from practical effects to CGI. Like, you might have seen a animatronic T-Rex, and then all of a sudden there's a seamless transition to a computer animated T-Rex, and your brain isn't seeing that dividing line. It was so seamless. Yeah. So Jurassic Park, again, we've talked about it on this podcast so many times, but one of the major milestones.
I probably saw that thing at least a dozen times that summer.
Yeah.
One last thing on Jurassic Park. Now, if you guys were to guess, what do you think the budget for that film would be adjusted for, $20-25?
If you're asking, I'd say north of 150. Easy.
150 million, you're saying, would be today's budget for Jurassic Park?
Easily.
I'm going to go a little less on that because there's not a ton of dinosaur screen time in Jurassic Park. They cut a lot of stuff out that was in the book. So I'm going to go under 100 million. I'll say 85 million.
You're closer. 140.
140 would have been today's budget.
So the actual budget in 93 was 63 million.
And so adjusted.
I just looked it up, would be about 140.
Interesting.
Which is, I guess, in the medium range of like a modern
if you got a Jurassic
Marvel movie or
if
something.
you get a Jurassic Park quality movie, not just CGI, but quality story and the score and everything.
For 140?
Yeah. You're the executive of the year.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we're going to jump ahead a little bit here just since you brought it up, but, Godzilla -1, that budget was what? Just a few $1 million or whatever. And what they accomplished in that film was so mind-numbing. Like, it was just so incredible what they pulled off on such a small budget. And a lot of that was because they focused on the human story and the computer effects kind of enhanced the story. So it wasn't all blown on, the budget wasn't blown on the animation. It
Also,
just enhanced
I
the
think
story.
it helped that the director also came from a visual effects background.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he knew he knew how to take care of those guys. And
right. He knew where not to skimp on, which I've read is a big thing now with CGI.
Oh, when Jurassic Park came out, it's like they got access to like the cocaine fields, and they just started like just throwing money. Like, I want that. I'm like, yeah, but do you know who you're asking? Because ILM can't do it all, and I think that's what happened.
Yeah, yeah. Now that we're in the post-Jurassic Park era, now there's effects people out there in Hollywood and around the world going, okay, we can do just about anything with this. So on my list of big leaps forward in CGI technology, I'm jumping ahead to 1999, The Matrix. The stuff they did in The Matrix was unlike anything I had ever seen before. And I came out of that theater a changed man. I looked at the world differently. And the one phrase that everyone is familiar with following the release of The Matrix is the bullet time effect.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about that is the bullet time effect was actually introduced before The Matrix. The Matrix just sort of perfected it for the film. But I have a vivid memory of seeing a TV commercial. And now, I couldn't find any evidence of this online, but what I remember was, I believe it was like a watch commercial, maybe Timex or something. And there's a guy on a mountain bike, like splashing through a muddy puddle. And the image froze with drops in the air. And the camera kind of rotated around the guy on the bike and then like showed his watch. And I remember sitting on my living room couch going, what the hell was that? Like, I don't understand what happened there. What am I looking at? But looking back at the history of bullet time, there's some commercials that they showed that I was like, oh, I remember that. Do you guys remember the Gap commercial? 1996, I think they were using the Louis Prima song, Baby, 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 it looks like it's going to hail. And they would have these young, attractive people wearing Gap clothing, and they were swing dancing. And like one guy would leap up in the air, like over someone's head, and his legs would be out, and then the camera would rotate around him, and then the action would continue. So there were examples of bullet time. And if you haven't seen this, 1996, there's a commercial. I've never seen it before. I saw it for the first time as I was doing research. There's a commercial. Look it up on YouTube. It's a Smirnoff, what is that, vodka?
Yeah.
Smirnoff commercial, 1996, about kind of like a James Bond type character, and it used bullet time. And I'm like, when was this made? 30 years ago? Because it looks like something that would be in a feature film today. So look it up. Smirnoff commercial, 1996, bullet time.
I'm also glad you brought up that Gap commercial because I remember it did not deliver. It didn't make me attractive. Lord knows I tried. Those clothes did not promise what they should have delivered.
Knocking people over, running to the Gap.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, so those little steps forward in what eventually became known as the bullet time technology was used in The Matrix, and just, again, another huge leap forward. Now, we're in 1999. Don't be looking at me like, okay, you're totally ignoring something, because everything is building up to this part of our podcast. George Lucas, the guy on our Mount Rushmore, who just, really advocated for digital technology. Everyone was saying, when are you going to do more Star Wars movies? When are you going to do more Star Wars movies? And he's like, I'll do them when the technology catches up to my ideas. That nexus happened in 1999 with a little movie called The Phantom Menace. Now, I want to open up this as a debate. The Phantom Menace comes out. I remember all the excitement. I remember seeing the trailer for the first time going, oh my God, look at these effects. Did Lucas pull it off, or do you feel that it just didn't have the real world weight because it was like 90% CGI? You had actors on blue screen sets reacting to things that didn't exist. They themselves, Natalie Portman, Christian Hayden, they were like, it was hard. And it affected our performances trying to act to a tennis ball or whatever.
You had Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor doing the best they could.
Yeah, with what they had to deal with. So what are your recollections of The Phantom Menace? I mean, I remember the excitement of it coming out, but now, all these years later, nearly 30 years later, if it's on TV, I'll watch it for a little bit.
It's the story dragged down. What visually, look, you can say visually they were able to show stuff that I'd seen before, though, because remember, this is post Jurassic Park, this is post Terminator, this is post Matrix. So when I see stuff, I believe it. Now I'm just saying, yeah, you're right. The special effects is caught up to your world. That looks like a better space fight, but the problem is all the people, the live action people in it, couldn't deliver a performance. So when they don't believe it, I'm not as excited.
And then we have this guy.
Oh, Mackie Big, the voice.
That is painful for me to watch. You know, I always say when I'm laying around the apartment on a Sunday afternoon and the Phantom Menace is on, I'll watch the opening sequence and using the lightsabers to melt the door and all that stuff. And then you know who shows up, and I'm like, I'm out. I can't get past Jar Jar.
Which is weird because right when that's motion capture too. He's not a pure CGI. That's motion capture. At the same time in New Zealand, there's a version of motion capture that's happening with Peter Jackson and
doing Gollum and stuff like that. Yeah,
with Andy Serkis, that it was infinitely better.
Yeah,
that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
So
that movie comes in 1999. They're already filming it to release in 2001.
Yeah.
Fellowship, and then you see that like, oh my god! But I mean.
So basically, the Star Wars movies in 99, Phantom Menace, 2002, Attack of the Clones, and we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith this year. And when I watch those movies, they feel like animated films that have real-life actors plopped into these animated backgrounds.
We kind of got a precursor of what George was going to do, though, in 1997 when he decided to go back and put special effects into the original trilogy. Yep. And some of them I was like, did we need dewbacks in Mos Eisley? Did we need the Jabba scene? That was so off-putting.
And they've changed that scene. Like, if you go on YouTube, you'll see the changes that Lucas continued to make with that cut Jabba scene. Initially, it was shot with a human actor.
Yeah.
The technology didn't exist that Lucas needed to replace that human actor. All these years later, he throws Jabba in there, and it was awful. So then he tweaked that, and then he tweaked that. And then a fan did something that makes more sense than anything Lucas did, where he created a holographic Jabba the Hutt, and Han Solo's having a conversation with this holographic Jabba the Hutt. I'm like, why didn't Lucas do that in the first place? Instead of trying to place him in that environment where now you have the dilemma of Han Solo walking behind Jabba the Hutt and everything.
Because there's no one there to say no to George.
You're exactly right.
Yep.
This is what I want to do. And then he keeps tweaking it and tweaking it. And now, you say, oh, the Star Wars special editions. Well, which ones are you talking about? Because they've tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it. We've seen now 4 or 5, maybe more versions of the original trilogy.
And the part when they use CGI on the live action where they have Han's head moved to the left to make sure that Greedo fired first now.
Brutal.
It looks like he's having a seizure. And it's very off-putting. And this is the kind of stuff where you go back to the Jeff Gold, Dr. Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Right. Now, have you seen the latest version of A New Hope? I got rid of Disney, but before I got rid of Disney, I was watching the latest special edition of A New Hope, and they added something that made my brain hurt. And I'm trying to figure out what the logic is. But you got Han Solo and Greedo sitting across from each other at the cantina, and Greedo says something in his native language, like, I've been waiting for this for a long time. And and Han Solo says, oh, I bet you have. And there's exchange about what is he, over my dead body or whatever.
Maybe he'll just take your ship over my dead body.
And then they cut to a close-up of Greedo's face, and he goes, McClunky. And then they fire at each other. And I was jarred. Like, I'm sitting on my couch like, what the hell was that? McClunky? Like, they added this scene, and apparently the logic behind it, I imagine Lucas and his team of yes men going, how can we make it look like the next thing that Greedo is going to do is fire his blaster? And apparently the what do you call that? The Star Wars world with all the extra stuff, the books and games and all that. Apparently someone had established that the word McClunky is like a threat, meaning you're going to shoot next or something. So they added in this shot of like Greedo basically saying, draw. I'm going to shoot now.
So he's just saying draw.
Like draw, And so when Han Solo hears McClunky, then he shoots Greedo first, but he's like, hey, he was going to shoot me because he said McClunky.
It might as well just say it was an ethnic slur, like the N-word or something. and so I was like, oh, really?
But that was jarring, and that's around the time when I said, you know what, I think I'm done with Disney.
And you know what that is? That's shaving. You shave. Oh, crap. And then you have to keep shaving until you get in there's no mustache left.
And then you end up with a Hitler mustache.
Yeah.
Joe, for that little extra scene, was it from the original shoot, like filming?
Yeah, like they looped in Greedo's, rubber mouth moving, but then they just had someone dub in the word McClunky.
I didn't know if it was a new thing they had.
No, it was just
or CGI,
some sort of justification that would have provoked Han Solo to shoot first, and it was just awful.
And Lucas might have inadvertently caused a very horrible gold rush in that it said, well, if George can do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
And he had executives signing off on CGI that was just awful.
Yeah. Now, my coworker Joey, this past weekend, he went to go see a midnight screening of Revenge of the Sith, and he said the crowd was really into it. And they wore robes and had lightsabers.
Oh, boy, they're still there.
We're yelling at the screen. And I'm like, you know what? You guys have your fun, because that audience were kids when Revenge of the Sith came out, and they've embraced it. And I'm like, I'm not going to criticize for anyone for loving something. Go ahead. It's just not my thing.
The dirty rumor out there for that movie is that some of the most memorable scenes were not directed by George. So there's the scene where Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? And he's not really going to kill the kids, and he just ignites the lightsaber. That's either Ron or Steven, because both of them were owed, they always wanted to direct a Star Wars movie, and that was supposed to be the last movie. That's episode 3. It tells the Skywalker story, and he's going to lock it up and says, I'm done with telling Star Wars. They never got to direct a Star Wars movie because they've always wanted to, because of the DGA fight. So they come onto the set, and they're like, well, George, can we just get a shot at this? They don't even have to give me credit for it. We have an idea we want to do.
They were each going to direct one scene.
Yeah, and so George's like, yeah, go ahead. It turns out those are the scenes that are like, oh, my God, that's a very character moment.
Yeah. Yeah, even though I've seen people criticize that particular scene when he slaughters kids, because it's we're talking Darth Vader here. Yeah. And it's your evolution into Darth Vader is to kill a bunch of kids. It doesn't quite sit right with a lot of people, but I don't know. So George Lucas, like I said, he gets the credit or the blame for the existence of CGI in films today, and
he felt at the dark side.
Good, and it's used bad, but
he was seduced by it.
Yeah,
I was just gonna mention two things about Star Wars. I was just reading the Wikipedia page for Phantom Menace, and Ron Howard said that him, Spielberg, and who was the third person that you think?
Coppola?
No, that Lucas asked if they wanted to direct it, and they all said no, it's too daunting. So it was Ron Howard, Spielberg. Who would you think would be the third?
Well, their
James
little
Cameron?
circle was. Coppola was part of that circle of friends.
Wasn't him. I can't imagine Coppola doing it.
Brian De Palma?
Nope.
Yeah, that's the other one I was going to guess. Yeah. It can't be Scorsese.
No,
part of that.
But
who
you
was
still
it?
Think 80s sci-fi, kind of sci-fi.
80s sci-fi. I'm drawing a blank.
Still making movies today.
Okay.
Yes.
Zemeckis.
Rob Zemeckis.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So I thought that was interesting. And one other thing, the young guy, Luke, who's been helping out with my show, directing. So he texted me over the weekend, said that he saw Revenge of the Sith. And I said, oh, you'd never seen the theater. But then I remembered he's so young. He's 18 or 19. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, shoot, you weren't even born.
Oh, yeah.
It made me feel so old. But seeing it, or what he was telling me through his eyes, because he had seen it on DVD when he was a kid and loved it. And I'm like, well, if I was that age seeing it for the first time, I would probably have a different view on it than I do now. Seeing it when I was 20 or 25, in 2005.
And that's why people love it today, is because there's that nostalgia factor.
I mean, there were kids,
when they
there
were
were kids that liked Phantom Menace.
And they bought up the Jar Jar merchandise.
Yeah. So
the pod racing.
As much as I dislike, especially Phantom Menace, it's like, and then some of my younger cousins, they said the same thing. They're like, "Oh, we love the prequels. How can you not like these, Andrew?" Then I had to think, oh well, from their point of view, it's going to be very different.
Which is funny because they're the same people that now criticize 7, 8, and 9. Especially when 8 and 9 came out, they're like, oh, what is this? I'm like, oh, does it bother you?
Yeah, yeah. All right, now, normally I don't like to focus on negativity, but this brings us to the point of the podcast of talking about some of the worst moments in CGI history. I mean, we let off the podcast with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So I went online, looked up some lists, and there's a number of titles that jumped out at me. The first one on my list here is the decision in the Green Lantern movie, 2011, instead of putting Ryan Reynolds, is that his name? Ryan Reynolds, yeah. Instead of putting him in a suit, they created an entirely CGI suit for some reason. So I don't know if he ran around with the little ping pong balls on him or whatever, but the decision was made to give him an all CGI suit. And I've never seen the movie. I mean, when it came out, people were just trashing it, so I avoided it.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
And that was Warner because they treated it like a superhero movie. It's their little formula, and it came out in between Thor and Captain America when Marvel was doing it, and that's why it got really smashed because they're like, look, at least Marvel cares enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
and he was trying to get Blake Lively.
People found his suit distracting. Putting this list together, I went and looked at a trailer, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, again, you might as well just make a cartoon.
And it's 2011. You have no excuse.
Yeah.
We're in the 21st century. A lot of what I thought would be on your list for like a horrible CGI was post Jurassic Park when it was the Wild Wild West of CGI, and everyone thought they could be ILM, and it's like, no, it's not that simple.
Yeah, just about every movie on this list is post Jurassic Park, which is heartbreaking. That it's like there's a regression here,
but not surprising.
Yeah. Another film, and this isn't in any particular order, but another film that was on a lot of lists, and I just hated this movie, was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, 2023. We're talking 2 years ago. They introduced the character of MODOK, and they took the human actor's face and just stretched it onto this round
on a Snapchat
body.
filter.
It was awful. I hated that film, man. I never want to see it again. I don't know what was behind the logic of that.
I only watched the first half hour on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is bad. And I had to turn it off.
Yeah,
but
it was terrible.
Where you throw millions of dollars down the drain and your budget goes to like $250, and then you're wondering why you're not pulling it back in the gross.
Yeah. Now, if we're talking Mount Rushmore of horrible, horrible moments in CGI history, there's one that comes up that would probably be on Mount Rushmore, or the lack thereof. 2 words, Superman's mustache. Do you guys remember the debacle behind that?
I remember everything about that version of the Justice League movie being a debacle.
Yeah.
I did not, the tragedy that came because of, Snyder's daughter passing away and all that. Him
had to bring in Joss Whedon.
Yeah, so he turns over the reins.
That was a nightmare.
Joss Whedon looks at what Snyder had done and tried to put his spin on it.
There were video games that had better graphics, better special effects.
So imagine Whedon going, get me Cavill. We need to do some reshoots. He shows up with a big mustache and goes, what do you need, boss? Well, we need you to lose the mustache. I can't do that because I'm in the middle of filming Man from Uncle. Was it Mission Impossible?
Mission Impossible, because that tells you the power of Tom Cruise.
Yeah. So he could not lose his mustache. So Whedon says, well, we'll shoot the scenes anyways. We'll remove it in post. And it was horrific. The end result was horrific. I remember seeing it in the theater, and you're staring at his upper lip. It's not moving naturally. What is happening?
It looked like a burn victim.
Yeah. It was such a poor decision and the scene that they shot, like, really? That was necessary to put all this time and effort into to film these scenes and remove his mustache and then go, And you go, no, we could have done without that. So that was one of the worst decisions in CGI history, is filming scenes with Henry Cavill and digitally removing his mustache. That's awful.
CGI, it's the one ring. It'll seduce you. Because we talk about the Matrix. Then we saw what happened with the Matrix sequels when they started really saying, "Oh, I want more. Just give me one." Like, hey guys, you can have one bowl of Captain Crunch. You have the entire box. You're probably gonna die.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When you give somebody, unlimited power, it's gonna cause problems.
Yep.
I mean, the Scorpion King will always be up there.
That's the next movie on my list. If we're talking Mount Rushmore of bad CGI, one of the worst things I've ever seen in film is The Rock in his first motion picture debut. I watched the scene earlier today. He's in silhouette most of the time. They're like, let's try to conceal this as long as we possibly can. So he's backlit and silhouetted. And then he steps out into the light with the scorpion body, the Rock's face, and I could not believe how bad it was. And then they tried to animate the Rock's smirk, and it just looked unnatural, like his mouth moved over to the side. That is right up there as some of the worst CGI I've ever seen in film.
That tells you that there were conflicting notes from the different suits. First, they're like, "Oh, we got to keep the silhouette." Great. But why is everything lit with fire? And you could just had all the fire go out, and they're fighting in the dark, and it's really scary. What's this ominous shadow?
They should have done that.
Yeah, and just be like, "Oh, you guys took the cards were better than what you would have seen."
Now, I've seen someone fix that scene, and this is kind of a little teaser of something we might talk about in a little bit, and that's the deep fake technology, where you can take an actor's face and map it onto another actor's body. So someone took footage of The Rock and pasted it over that awful CGI in Scorpion King, and I was like, that's not so bad.
I mean, Joe, anything would have been an improvement. You could take a crayon and drawn it on there.
Right, yeah. So, unfortunately, deepfake technology didn't exist at the time, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but that definitely was an improvement, and that's in the Hall of Fame of bad CGI. Now, the next film that's on my list, here's the memory I have of it. I remember taking my nephew to it. So let's see, this was 2003. So my nephew would have been about 6 or so. And I remember watching this movie, turning to my 6-year-old nephew going, "What did you think?" And he said, "Uncle Joe, that was awful." 6-year-old that was his review of The Hulk. I don't even know if there's a "the" on it. I think it's just called Hulk, starring Eric Bana. And that is some of the worst CGI I've ever seen in my life. Not only with the Hulk, but also with the Abomination that came on in the second half of the movie or whatever. Yeah. I never want to see that movie again. I have no desire to ever watch that movie again. And when you have a 6-year-old sitting next to you and we're going to see some live action Hulk, and this is what they came up with. It was awful. And and there's a reason why it's not acknowledged as part of the Marvel universe.
Your nephew would have said, most uncles just ground people if I did something wrong.
He's got tears in his eyes. What did I do to deserve that, Uncle Joe?
Joe, this is the kind of stuff that if don't let that guy put you in a home. Don't let that kid put you in a home.
That's right.
That kid should have grounded you for taking him.
I think I bought him some Sour Patch Kids afterward, made up for it. But yeah, that was some really bad CGI.
I saw that in the theater when it came out, and so this was right after they brought out X-Men and Spider-Man. So they was starting to heat up for comic book movies, and I had high hopes for it, but I didn't like anything about the film. Nothing about the film at all. Like,
oh no, I mean it was just.
I like Eric Bana in general as an actor.
Yeah,
but it didn't work. It didn't work.
Absolutely.
And then I remember on our text thread for our podcast, I think it was Robert who said, check out the scene of, I think he said the mutated dogs or something.
Oh, that too. Yeah,
from this film. Yeah. And I had completely forgotten about that, and I had to go back and watch it, and I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's Robert undoing a lot of therapy that minister paid for.
Send him a bill.
That's right.
No, think Spawn, you think League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're just movies that were just coming out with just schlock CGI. Like, oh my god.
Yeah. Now there's a movie. The next movie on my list here came out in 1997. It's a great film. It's a really good film with one of the worst CGI scenes ever depicted on film. I'm talking about Air Force One.
Oh my god.
There's a climactic scene where the president needs to get off the Air Force One, which is about ready to crash into the ocean. I know. We got to go back to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and have these memories removed. So there's I think there's a helicopter that's trying to pull Harrison Ford off of the plane as it's going into the water. The bad guy is stuck on the plane. Harrison Ford gets pulled off the plane in the nick of time. So now this plane is sort of skimming on the water, and I'm like, okay, I'll allow it. And then it tumbles as if it's just a wireframe computer model with no real world physics applied to it, and it tumbles, and I'm like, what the heck? It ruins a great movie. And I could only imagine, I have no memory of this. I'm sure I saw the movie in the theater, but I have no memory of how the crowd reacted to that. But if you go on YouTube today and you watch that clip, you're like, how did they get away with this?
It's
there. Awful.
It was a loud groan.
Oh, man.
Because remember, we're coming from 1996. We had Independence Day where you could use models.
Yeah.
Just have the model, which was cheaper, and you could have crashed it the way you wanted and have it broken up the way you wanted. Oh, my God.
Why didn't they use a practical model?
Because everyone's got to have CGI. Every suit wants a piece of that pie, and not everyone is ILM. They probably used ILN. That's the problem.
And I think also at that time, since it was still just a couple years removed from T2 and Jurassic Park, it was like a status thing.
Yeah.
Like if
your movie didn't have it.
Yeah. But if your movie does have it, people are going to flock to the theaters to see that. It doesn't matter how.
And
good
everyone's
the
probably starting their own division. They're grabbing everyone that got rejected from ILM.
Yeah. Now, there's a movie. Could you do me a favor real quick, Andrew? Look up when a movie came out called In the Line of Fire with Clint Eastwood. And the reason I'm bringing this up is you can use computer-generated imagery in a film, but not wave your hands in the air and go, look at this. This is computer-generated. I remember watching the making of In the Line of Fire, and there's a scene where I believe the president is speaking at a rally or something. Clint Eastwood's there, making sure he doesn't get shot. And there are people there waving banners and stuff. And I'm like, okay, why are we looking at a scene that apparently was shot in the field or whatever? And they're like, let's remove the CGI element. And all the audience disappeared, and just fencing and things you wouldn't think of. All of that stuff was added with CGI, but you would have never known it because it enhanced that scene. It didn't detract from it. It didn't take anything away from it, and you just weren't even aware that it was CGI. That's when CGI works, when it's used to enhance the story and not...
It's support, not principle.
Yeah.
It's not the principle one.
Yeah. Did you find it? In the Line of Fire.
Yeah. Came out in 93.
93, so we're going all the way back.
For the scenes of campaign rallies, the filmmakers used digitally altered footage from campaign events of George H.W. and Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
The movie also inserted digitized images from the 1960s Eastwood movies into the Kennedy assassination scenes.
How cool. That's awesome. See, I didn't even know that. That's really neat.
There was a writer for the LA Times said, Clint Eastwood gets the world's first digital haircut.
There's a milestone right there.
Of course, I've never seen it. Guess what it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
It's got to be decent. Yeah.
96.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I'm trying to remember who the villain was in that, but he was a great villain.
Sad Malkovich was in it.
John Malkovich, yeah. So that is an example of how you can use CGI to enhance a film. And I always point to that film as really excellent use of CGI, where in Air Force One, it takes you out of the moment.
Yep.
There's a line in that clip I played earlier. It was a time of belief and in a time of what's the word? Incredulity.
No, I'm
Incredulity.
Yeah. And
the comment section is going to be brutal.
I know. But I looked it up, and basically what it means is being taken out of the moment and not believing in what you're seeing. And that's what CGI does. It can either pull you into the film and totally make you believe what you're seeing, or it snaps you out of that slumber that you're in as you're watching this film and believing that it's happening on the screen. and then you see something and you're like, damn it. Like it just pulls you out of that. It's like someone woke you up from a hypnosis and you're back in the real world. So yeah, that was a really poor example. Another movie on my list is 1997's Anaconda.
Oy vey.
I concede that it's silly, campy, fun, or whatever, but the anaconda, which is like the world's largest snake, doesn't move lightning quick. It's slow and it drops on you from the trees and then wraps around you. But in this movie, man, it's racing around like it's a viper or something, and that's
some
one
mythological
of the,
figure.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem I have with CGI is when they ignore the laws of physics. When something moves in a film that doesn't seem to be obeying the laws of physics, you can't help but your brain goes, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And to have that anaconda move lightning quick like it does in that film, you can't help but laugh. It almost plays like a comedy.
I think live action in the 90s struggled with trying to blend it CGI properly in there, especially, it's one thing in Line of Fire if it's just a support, but when there's a principal element like the antagonist, the namesake Anaconda, it's horrible. Unless you do 1995 Toy Story, which is the whole thing is CGI, so going in, I don't have to worry about anything. It just entertained me, and then they pulled it off.
Yeah, and that is the first 100% computer-generated image film.
Because at that point, you already know walking into suspend disbelief.
Yeah.
Your eyes and your brain aren't trying to go back and forth between, is that real or is that fake? Is that real or is that fake?
Yeah.
And doing that, like you said, it'll take you out of it. Did you hear they're remaking Anaconda? With Paul Rudd and Jack Black. It's going to be a comedy.
Yeah. It has to be. You have to acknowledge that it's laughable.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
For the nostalgia purposes.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Now, speaking of Toy Story, I'm going to throw this out to you guys. I mean, obviously, Toy Story is a milestone because it's 100% CGI. Would you have rather have seen Andy and his mother depicted as real-life characters played by actors?
No.
It would have been interesting because I think it would have made the toys more believable if they had sort of a real actor component interacting with them, but then they wouldn't have been able to say, well, this is a 100% CGI movie. So I think at some point, I'm sure that there were a bunch of people sitting around a conference table discussing it. Like, we could make those characters live action, but then we wouldn't have broken that glass ceiling.
They tried something like that with small soldiers.
Right, exactly.
Those toy soldiers. and
Which was very convincing. Like, that was really, and I think a lot of that was puppetry. I think a lot of
and then they used the CGI for the mouth. So
right,
when they
right.
But I think the Lego movie tried that with the end.
Will Ferrell and all that,
But that was actually, those were pure live action because the Lego pieces weren't moving at that time. They were
Yeah. So that's something I always thought about. But, like I said, they wanted to be the first to do a 100% CGI movie, and that's what they did. And that's what
Joe, it just occurred to me I'm glad you mentioned this. Did we mention Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
No, because there is no CGI in
that's just a pure blending of.
That's shooting live actors and then using traditional animation
to layer
over the top of that, and the choreography and everything that went into that to make it all seem seamless was mind-boggling.
That's true.
But yeah, there was no, as far as I know, there was no CGI involved in that because we're talking 88, I think. And that was traditional animation and live action.
Because now I remember the thing where Hoskins put him in the sink. They actually had splashing.
Yeah, and there was like a pipe that would come up that would spit water
at his face. Yeah.
And I remember Hoskins saying that when I grabbed Roger's neck, he said I had to keep my fingers closed because if I did this, it would add tens of thousands of dollars to the animation budget because they had to animate between his fingers. So he had to close his fingers. But no CGI in there as far as I know. So, but that definitely was a milestone. And the thing I remember appreciating with Roger Rabbit at the time is I really hoped that there would be a sequel someday, and it just wasn't possible. And I'm glad to say that I saw Roger Rabbit in the theater knowing that it's something we've never seen before. and we'll never see again is Warner Brothers characters and Disney characters on screen at the same time, interacting in an adult way. I mean, Jessica Rabbit and everything. That all the parties somehow agreed to this and put together one, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made.
Simpler times.
I think it's towards the end when Hoskins is falling out of that plane. Is it Roger Rabbit? Or no, I'm sorry, Donald Duck and Daffy Duck?
No, so falling out of the sky was Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
And both, Disney and Warner Brothers, like, they have to have equal screen time, so they were on screen at the same time. Then later there was the dueling pianos that had Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, and they had to have equal screen
Daffy calls out Donald. I can't understand what he's saying.
I absolutely love that movie.
It is. It's one of the greatest movies
ever made. I love how they use pretty much an animated short at the beginning when they're filming the baby.
Off,
I love that.
It's one thing, and this is a little off topic here, but it drives me crazy when we talk about movies like Roger Rabbit or, say, Indiana Jones or whatever, that when you look at a lot of greatest movie lists, that these movies are left off these lists, and I will never understand it. How can someone argue that Who Framed Roger Rabbit isn't one of the greatest movies ever made? It is.
Yeah.
It is. It should be on any list. But you get snobs who are like, oh, it's not a grown-up movie. I don't know.
Another great Zemeckis film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, we're talking about these great films. I almost hate to bring up this last film on my list.
You have to. There's still a spot on Mount Rushmore.
Cats.
Oy.
2019.
Well, all my therapy's gone.
Oh, my God.
That was traumatic.
I never saw it in theaters. I had no interest in seeing it in theaters. But what I've seen, it was just a bad idea that just got worse. And apparently there are moments where they forgot to add CGI
I heard that.
Was it Dame Judi Dench's hands or something? There's scenes where they just, whoops, we forgot to animate her hands.
Did you actually watch it, Nick?
No. I couldn't see the whole thing. I saw clips. When they put it on YouTube, I put it in clips because when I saw the trailer, I went, "This is a nightmare." Yeah. What was truly horrifying, outside of the special effects, the CGI, was the cast. Did none of their managers or agents tell them, "Yeah, you shouldn't do this"?
Yeah, I mean Taylor Swift of all people, she's in this monstrosity. Yeah, just a bad idea. It would have been better just to make them up like they do in the Broadway stage, and just shoot the Broadway musical.
That also adds to my thing, the revenge of the theater degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, just theater majors. That's the revenge of the theater majors. I don't know how many deals with the devil they made to get that cast and that budget.
Yeah, awful. One of the most forgettable movies ever made. Now, it's not all bad. There have been some major advancements in the technology recently. With Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, they tried to create modern versions of deceased actors or actors when they were younger, and they tried to do it entirely CGI, which I thought was a mistake, but I guess they had no real alternative. And so in Rogue One, they did Peter Cushing and Leia Carrie Fisher. And it's like, close but no cigar.
But the Peter Cushing was actually better than the Leia one.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a guy, and again, I wish I knew his name. I should have done more research on this. But there's a guy who pretty much perfected the technology known as deep fake technology. And this is something that I had in my brain years ago, but I don't have the computer background to pull it off. But I remember thinking, couldn't you take all the performances of Marilyn Monroe on film, digitize them, and then use those facial expressions, everything in a new version of Marilyn Monroe? I've been thinking about that for decades, and that's basically what deepfake technology is. You could take the performance of an actor from their earlier films and map those out on a kind of a body double, like in the case of The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So in The Mandalorian, they had that amazing scene where Luke Skywalker returns and destroys all those dark troopers. And then they do the big reveal of the CGI young Mark Hamill face. And I was like, oh, I was really into it. And then I saw that CGI face, and there's just that dead eye look, and I was really bummed. But Lucasfilm or Disney or whoever's responsible for these shows, they hired that deep fake guy who had been putting things on YouTube for years. So I believe when the Book of Boba Fett premiered and they brought back that young Mark Hamill Luke Skywalker character, I was like, wait a second, something's different here. That looks like a young Mark Hamill. And that's basically what they did. They took a body double who had similar size and facial, construction, and put a young Mark Hamill's performance on that. And I'm like, this is it.
It looked better. Yeah.
This is the future of CGI technology, especially when it comes to actors who aren't around anymore. Or you need to de-age or whatever. Deep fake technology has me very excited, but it has me very scared because it can be so convincing that it seems like it's just going to be a matter of years where we're not going to be able to believe what we see in video. Someone can say, here's a video of Joe Hollywood robbing a bank. And I'm like, that's not me. It's like, there you are right there.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's scary what they can accomplish.
I would have believed until Joe started parkouring everywhere. And I was like, I know Joe.
I know Joe, and he's no parkour.
Yeah.
I know. I see a lot of people share video on Facebook thinking that it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether if it's a cleverly edited.
Currently, right now, it's the line right at the jaw. Like that, then you can. That's how you can tell.
Yeah.
That there's
Even if it's like a, people are always making fake movie trailers. People will share them as if they're real, and they're like, I can't wait for this. And I start watching it. I immediately know, and I'm like, this is a fan made thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's not even deepfake like I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So imagine.
Well, AI is going to play a role too to sort of bridge that gap. But there's a video I discovered years ago that was fan made where it looks like it's just cell phone video. Two guys are in a liquor store or whatever, convenience store, and they're like, "Isn't that Keanu Reeves? Have you seen this?" And they're like, they want to get his autograph and stuff. And they're like, "Are you Keanu Reeves?" And he turns around, he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Keanu Reeves!" And then like a robber comes in to rob the convenience store, and Keanu Reeves is like, "Put the gun down. I'll give you my Mustang from John Wick." And I'm like, "Wait, what's going on here?" And you quickly realize that it is Keanu Reeves' face with his beard mapped over an actor that they shot in this convenience store. And I'm like, this is a game changer. This is huge. Because if you showed it to someone who wasn't aware of all the technology and you said, "Hey, check out this little thing that Keanu Reeves is in," they'd be like, "Yeah, so he did this short film." You look at it, you think it's Keanu Reeves. And there's a Tom Cruise one where they hired an actor who can kind of imitate Tom Cruise, and then they mapped Tom Cruise's face on him, and it's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable.
Skill-wise, it is remarkable. I'm not too concerned a bit of it when it comes to monetization because then you have to show the proof in the pudding. Because the real Tom Cruise, like, I never did that.
Yeah.
The real Keanu was like, I can't do that, and I'm going to sue you. Because whoever you are, if you want to collect money from YouTube or whatever, you got to put some real information out. It's got to go to your bank account.
Yeah.
So they'll find you one way or another.
Yeah. But I feel that deepfake technology is the next big leap in CGI to make CGI characters look more photorealistic. It's a huge game changer.
Imagine if they did biopics now, like Ana de Armas, but without her, go get Marilyn.
Yeah, exactly. and it's going to happen. At some point, we're going to see a deepfake Marilyn in
There was a
new
movie with, what's his face, Al Pacino called... start with an S. Oh my God! It was
Serpico?
No. Simone, okay. Where he was like a Stanley Kubrick type director, and he got so tired, fed up with all these actors that some crazed fan who loved him made a CGI AI digital. He could create the actor will give him everything he wants, and it was so convincing that people were like, we have to meet her. Her name was Simone.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
If you get a chance to look at that, and then he's like, oh, and then he got his psychosis came through. He's like, you're going to get in trouble, Mr. Taransky. I know. And then he was accused of murdering her.
Yeah. A woman that never existed. Yeah. So that's the future of this technology when it comes to de-aging and stuff. A lot of de-aging technology is just not convincing. They try to do it with prosthetics. I still have yet to see The Irishman, but apparently they used a lot of CGI to de-age and age Pesci and De Niro. So we're getting there.
Did you not like the movie in general, or just talking about the CGI?
I mean, the CGI took me. First of all, it's a 3-hour movie, so I don't want to hear Scorsese ever talk about.
That's my biggest problem.
You have
finding the time to
watch it over 2 nights.
Yeah,
but it is really good if you can overlook the CGI.
Right,
but I loved it.
But I mean, that tells you something. You don't want that. It's like Air Force One. Why would you ruin it with CGI? I'd rather you just done makeup, prosthetics.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can make Colin Farrell look like the Penguin.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I think it was the Batman movie. I saw it with a friend, and I'm like, I turned to my friend after the movie's over, and I'm like, boy, Colin Farrell was unrecognizable. And she was like, what now? And I said, Colin Farrell. She's like, who was he? I said, he was the Penguin. She's like, no, he wasn't. I'm like, that was Colin Farrell. So you can do, like you said, practical effects, practical makeup, and achieve the effect that you want without distracting CGI.
I've never heard anybody say that I've ever talked to on this topic say they like CGI better than practical effects.
Right.
It's I think a pretty universal thing at this point where it's like, all right, make it believable that I get lost in it.
Yeah. And then that was a problem with the latest Indiana Jones movie, the Dial of Destiny. They tried to de-age Harrison Ford, which I'm like, okay. One problem was they made no effort to de-age his voice. Yeah. So you have this younger looking Harrison Ford who talks like a grizzled old man. And it's like, if you're going to de-age the character, you got to use some AI or something to do the voice too. You can't just record an elderly Harrison Ford. It doesn't work.
The mouse is skimping.
Yeah. Now there were moments where, on the train and stuff where I'm like, okay, if I squint, I might buy into this. But I swear there were moments where Indy would turn his head quickly and his face would lag behind. And I'm like, what was that? Like that happened a couple of times in that film.
You never want to have the if I clause. If I take 2 shots of vodka, this movie's great. If I do a 5th, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So there's, they did what they had to do to shoot that script. But again, we're just not quite where we need to be. Now, another thing I want to touch on is another advancement in technology that I really love is what they call the volume. And this goes back to The Mandalorian, where instead of shooting actors in front of a blue screen and putting backgrounds in later, which would create problems for The Mandalorian because his armor is reflective. So now they have a sound stage that's completely encompassed in video monitors, and they create the backgrounds, digitally. But now they're being projected on these monitors that you now see reflected on the Mandalorian. So when he's in the cockpit of his ship and he hits light speed and they cut to his helmet, you see the star streak reflected on his helmet. And to do that, in post with digital effects would take a long time and be time consuming. Just put it up on a monitor and let it reflect off his helmet. And so the actors say they prefer it because they're seeing the environment around them. There's some practical things in the room with them, but then all the mountain ranges or the environment that they're in is projected on the screen.
And you can add the wind, you can add the spray of the ocean.
Yeah, and it enhances the performances. And so that's another, I think, positive advancement in the area of CGI is instead of relying on blue screen so much, which can cause problems, is to let the actors act in that environment. And I really love watching those behind-the-scenes featurettes that show how they use the volume and how they use sort of computer game technology to create those backgrounds that move with the camera, so that if the camera is rotating around the actor, the background and the scene stays in sync with the camera. And I'm like, that's a positive advancement in this technology, and I'd like to see more people use it.
I mean, one of the advances I thought, and again, he's second time he's on this list now, because he put a lot of investment into it, was Avatar. Mm-hmm. When they first came out, and that was the first thing they were trying to do, 3D immersion before they launched that whole 3D nonsense where everything was 3D.
Yeah.
Didn't need to be. It's like Schindler's List in 3D, and like this doesn't need to be in 3D.
Coming at you.
Yeah. But Avatar was, when I first sat there, I actually saw stuff, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. This is, I wonder what's the next step.
Yeah, I will say this. Avatar was one of the greatest theater-going experiences I've ever had. Is it a great movie? We've seen it before in Dances with Wolves and stuff like that. The story wasn't all that original. But sitting in that theater, seeing those little jellyfish-like pollen or whatever it was wafting in front of your face where you feel like you can reach out and catch one of these things. I've never had any experience like that in the theater.
And that's
before.
different than just having things where something like shoots at your eye. Like
Yeah.
they just try to throw some silly thing. That's what followed Avatar. Like everyone's like, oh, it's 3D. Just give them what they want.
Yeah. So that's another name that needs to be on the Mount Rushmore of CGI is James Cameron. The innovations that he introduced, the experiences that he gave to audiences to see these things on a screen for the first time and going, my God, what am I looking at? He's a big reason why I love going to the theater and having these experiences in the theater and seeing these things for the first time. I would rather see, say, Terminator 2 on the screen on opening night on Friday than to have someone later in the week go, oh my God, did you see Liquid Metal Man? It's like, shut up. I want to experience that on the screen. And Cameron has given us that. I mean, if I was to ever bump into him on the street, I would say, I just want to shake your hand and thank you for the experiences that you've given me in the movie theater.
Apologize fast, real quick, because I heard he might have a short temper or stuff like that. When you bump into him, you're like, what did you? No.
Yeah.
I love you.
It's funny you say that because a friend of mine sends me a picture and he goes, is this who I think it is? He sends me the picture. It's James Cameron standing on a sidewalk in New York, staring directly into the camera. I'm like, what's the story behind this? And he says, I was standing outside the same hotel, staying at the same hotel. He says he looks up, he sees James Cameron, he picks up his phone, snapped a picture with Cameron, staring daggers at him, and then he just didn't want to bother and walked away. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I would have taken the chance to go up and shake his hand just to say thank you. Thank you for those experiences you gave me. I just watched Aliens again just the other night. And again, this goes back to our conversation, is I don't know how anyone could not rank Aliens among the greatest films ever made. It is a remarkable achievement with comedy and drama and horror and the effects and the adrenaline.
And more action than the first movie.
I think that's where people try to ding it because it's following something that is considered one of the in the Hall of Fame of horror films, which is Alien. And it's like, oh, why'd you make it an action thing? Well, this was some horror but more action, and that's where we're going with the story. But
yeah, you know what makes me smile when I watch Aliens, just because it's a little on the cheesy, corny side. But that might be one of the last films ever made that used the rear projection technology from the 40s. Where like when the one ship is coming in to rescue them from the planet, and then the alien kills the pilot and it's crashing. They're clearly standing in front of a big movie screen. And they're rear projecting the imagery, and they have to react to the big movie screen. And it makes me smile because Cameron was like, this is an homage to, the Cary Grant movies where he's manipulating the steering wheel and the background is moving behind him. And I'm like, that's kind of awesome that transition happened from rear screen to digital, within that late 80s.
Never noticed that about.
Oh yeah,
that.
There's several moments where there's rear projection being used, and I love it. I think it's awesome.
One thing I was going to say about Alien Romulus, I know you saw it, Joe. Did you see it? So I did. I thought I liked almost everything about the movie. I love the practical effects, but the CGI of the robot dude,
Ian Holm.
What's his name? Ash?
Oh, Ash.
Yeah.
So I heard that they fixed it, though, on the Blu-ray and HBO Max.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched it, so I haven't seen how it looks.
I'll check it out now, but I'll still be upset for I'm like, did you really need that in post? You could have done that in whatever fix you that's just mad.
Yeah.
So
it was a great concept, poor execution.
Yeah. They wanted, of course, to tie in something from the first movie, and I get it, because that movie takes place between Alien and Aliens, but that that was the one thing where I was looking at the screen like, come on, guys, you could have upped this big time.
Yeah.
But everything else about that movie I really liked. But
yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to mention something real quick. I think this could be a negative trend, and I think we talked about this outside of the podcast room. I was watching two guys having a conversation about films, and they brought up the most recent Ghostbusters film, which I haven't seen yet. And they said that in scenes where two actors are walking down a New York street having a conversation, instead of filming it on a New York street, they filmed the actors against a blue screen and completely created from scratch New York backdrops that we've all seen, that we're all familiar with. They felt it necessary to create from scratch using computer imagery. And I'm like, why? Why? I don't understand that at all.
Just have a second unit.
Yeah.
Go get some footage. Have them just walk.
Yeah.
Sign releases and have them just walk.
I hope that's not a trend. I don't want to see computer-generated imagery of the real world, because now all of a sudden everything's going to be on a soundstage in front of a blue screen. And instead of going out and filming a tree, and just whip one up on the
I'll tell you what, there's a movie on Netflix that just came out with Tom Hardy called Havoc. Has a lot of CGI scenery.
Yeah.
Where I'm watching that, it's meant to be an action scene where I'm like, that's not a real town.
Yeah. That really bugs me. And that's, does it save that much money? Like, if you were to send a couple of Ghostbusters actors to New York City, close the street down for a day, shoot some dialogue, is that going to cost the same amount of money as rendering that background completely from scratch? I don't see the savings in that, but I'm not, one of the bookkeepers in Hollywood.
If we could blur their face and change their voice, I'd love to get a retired studio accountant.
Yeah.
Someone had to write the ledgers and just ask them, how does this work? How does this happen? Do you guys we're budgeted for $50 million. Wait, what's this next page? Why is another $25 million in here?
Yeah. I don't know. But so that's, I feel, a negative trend. But we're in the best of times. We're in the worst of times. We've seen some really remarkable advancements. We've seen some really bad CGI. And will that always be the case, or is it?
I think
we'll see.
I think it depends on the artist. It depends on the writer. It depends on the director. It depends on how how much conviction they have to push back against studios that'll want to add stuff on there.
Yeah.
And say, no, I got this. I have ideas. Trust me, it'll save you money.
Right. All right. On that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of Hollywood Blockbusters. And guys, thanks for the conversation.
No, absolutely.
Thanks to you at home for listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Come to the movies. Watch Charlie Chaplin and put some sunshine into your day. Forget the hard times. Come to the movies and try to laugh your troubles away.